Divide, Politicizing the Response to Community Tragedy. This is our second Lessons in Recovery and Resilience Speaker Series event of 2023, and it's our first in-person panel in a while. We have a small audience here in Buffalo, but we have a broader audience registered from all over the country and some internationally. This event is being recorded and will be made available at a later date on our YouTube channel as well. Today, you're going to hear from some compassionate speakers, survivors, service providers, advocates, and agents of change with lived experience that show the strength, resilience, and kindness of the human spirit in the face of tragedies. You'll be hearing from individuals who directly survived or lost family members in acts of targeted violence, racially motivated mass shootings, and we're here in Buffalo with a community that only recently passed their first-year milestone since the tragedy at Tops Friendly Markets on May 14th, 2022. I want to recognize at the outset that all of us here with Tuesday's Children are entering this conversation with cultural humility. We know that we in no way speak for this community, nor can we fully understand the pains that individuals have faced. But we hope to provide a platform for these lived experiences within this community and for those voices to be heard and to resonate to a broader society. We hope to better understand their experiences and to offer peer connections through Tuesday's Children, through our staff, but also through the more than 20 communities represented in our Survivors of Tragedy outreach program, which is called STOP, and through our wide network of individuals, families, and community partners who have experienced similar pain and want to help. We hope that in some small measure, these connections can bring hope and light, and we aim to continue to be a resource in the days. After more than 2 decades working with the 9/11 community, with military families of the fallen, with global victims of terrorism, and with communities impacted by mass violence, and populations recovering from wide-scale trauma and grief, we know firsthand that recovery and resilience are not so much a destination as they are a direction. We're heading there together, and Buffalo, we are with you. Whether you're joining us in person or virtually, we encourage you to explore the online workspace, to view full speaker bios, to take part in live discussions, interactive polls, and we even have a feelings wheel where you can indicate how you're doing today. This workspace will stay live throughout the month of June for you to access some of the resources that we've shared. We're also aware that some of the subject matter today may be activating or upsetting. So please know that our team is available to support during and following the program. On site here in Buffalo, we have counselors from Best Self available for anyone who may want support. And for those of us who are joining us virtually, you can private message us on Zoom or on Housespace. And if you need to take a break from the content, rest assured that this session is recorded and will be made available to all registered attendees after the event concludes. We're talking today about destigmatization and politicization. And I want to emphasize here that the views expressed by each individual today are not necessarily the views of all, but they do represent the lived experiences of our panelists. And we want to hear all of those with dignity. We're so grateful to all of our speakers for joining us and for the ways that they use their voices and share their experiences to advocate for ways to improve care and, most importantly, to infuse hope into the lives of others. At Tuesday's Children, we always aim to infuse hope through connections and peer support, through our mentoring, our wellness programs, our family-focused events that create a nurturing community. In our audience today, virtually and in person, we have family members, we have service providers, experts, survivors, compassionate individuals seeking to support others. We hope that all of you also find a nurturing community with us today. If you're new to Tuesday's Children, we hope that you will get more deeply involved with us. I also want to give a big thank you to our dedicated team of colleagues at Tuesday's Children who've organized all the logistics for this event today. And finally, we are truly grateful to our funders who make these Lessons in Recovery and Resilience events possible, namely the Department of Homeland Security, Targeted Violence and Terrorism Prevention Program, the New York Life Foundation, and the Braver Heart Fund. I'm pleased that we have Jamie Barcombe here with us today. He's the Regional Prevention Coordinator for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security Center for Prevention Programs and Partnerships. It goes by CP3. And I'd like to invite him up to just give a few brief remarks.
Thank you. Sally, thank you for that introduction and for organizing this event. It's really important. I'd like to thank the members of the panel who are here today for their contributions to this important conversation on resiliency, and those attending both in person and virtually. Most importantly, we certainly would like to recognize the family members and the victims present today for their courage, for their strength, for their grace, and their commitment to shaping a better future born out of an unimaginable tragedy. I believe this convening tonight will honor the victims of Buffalo, as well as the victims of many other communities around the country who have experienced similar tragedies. I also expect that this event will promote an ongoing process of healing and continue important conversations addressing the unending need to combat targeted violence and terrorism in all its forms. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here as a member of the Center for Prevention Program Partnerships, CP3, which was formed in 2021 with the express purpose of focusing on prevention of targeted violence and terrorism by supporting communities around the country. CP3 seeks to build partnerships at all levels, and not only in government, but also within our communities, amongst our stakeholders in the private sector, as well as in the nonprofit sector. We do this to raise awareness of the threat of targeted violence and terrorism that exists, and we hope to build capacity at the local level to prevent future acts of targeted violence and terrorism. So we do this in part by investing in both established best practices, but also in innovative concepts that build an evidence base that's part of a public health informed approach towards prevention. And this is the same way the country has tried for decades to address other forms of violence in our communities. So this public health informed approach will focus on the health, the safety, and the well-being of the population to better inform our policies and our prevention practices in the future, while simultaneously protecting our fundamental rights and civil rights. Through our grant program, we've been able to award $50 million over the last 3 years to communities around the country. These programs have helped build capacity amongst our practitioners and our professionals and our policymakers. In addition to grant funding that supports state and local authorities, CP3 is invested in nonprofit organizations such as Tuesday's Children that contribute to prevention by raising awareness about the impact of targeted violence and terrorism and turning heartache into hope. CP3 also invests in a number of other projects that support or enhance community level protective factors to mitigate impacts that are associated with adverse experiences or other risk factors. Beyond our grant program, CP3 also invests in innovative programs such as the Invent to Prevent program, which is for high school and college students, that helps them develop locally developed prevention programs to address hate and bias and targeted violence in their communities. So we're very proud to support Tuesday's Children in the work that they do. We think it is integral to prevention, and we are here to work as a partner in prevention. And in closing, I'd just like to share 2 themes that I've heard our secretary talk about a number of times in many places he's been, which is something that captures very well, I think, the nature and the purpose of the work we do at CP3, which is one, remember that the Department of Homeland Security is essentially a department of partnerships. We work with partners not only throughout the federal government and around the world, but also with local communities and all stakeholders across many different sectors. And secondly, to remind ourselves that we all have a role to play in prevention. So with that, we look forward to working and partnering with the community and other communities in this vital work to be successful in preventing targeted violence and terrorism in the future. And we're very proud to do that work with all of you. So we look forward to the conversation tonight. And thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you for everyone for being here today, both in the room and on Zoom. My name is Catherine Ellard. I'm the COVID Response Manager at Tuesday's Children. We would like now to have a brief moment of silence
to acknowledge the trauma and grief caused by these tragedies, and to honor the many lives, families, and communities that have been forever changed by terrorism, targeted violence, military conflict, and the global pandemic.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. So we're just going to talk a little bit about Tuesday's Children for those of you who don't know our organization, and we provide a lifetime of healing for families who have been forever changed by terrorism, military conflict, or mass violence. Our initial service population was the 3,051 children who lost a parent in September 11th tragedy, which happened on a Tuesday, which is why we're called Tuesday's Children. We also support all families who lost a loved one that day. And then in later years, we expanded our services to include global victims of terrorism, military families of the fallen, responder families, many of whom were recovering from exposure at the World Trade Center site, and so many of whom have now lost their lives and leave families behind. And we also work with other communities now that have sadly been impacted by mass violence and wide-scale trauma and loss. So over 2 decades, we've now helped over more than 50,000 people through what we call our long-term healing model. It's a proven approach to building resilience, post-traumatic growth, and common bonds. We're a trusted resource to families, children, and communities on their long road to healing after trauma and loss. We usually present on the many ripple effects of the tragedies we've responded to. 9/11 was a particularly expansive tragedy. The long-term effects continue to manifest this day. Believe it or not, there are still legal proceedings happening relative to 9/11, and a lot of families will never have closure. Beyond 9/11, we've responded to the ripple effects of military losses, global terrorism, mass violence, pandemic. But today we want to emphasize one ripple that has become more of a wave: targeted violence. Targeted violence, like we've seen in Buffalo, is plaguing our communities. There are more than 10 mass shootings per week. And perhaps most upsetting, especially for parents like me, gun violence is now the leading cause of death for children in America, which I think is just unacceptable any way you look at it. There are a few models for disasters, but when we look at the Buffalo community, this new chronic cyclical disaster model that was created by Vibrant Emotional Health depicts ways that the stress load of a community can escalate when there are foundational issues, there are chronic stressors, and all of that is present, and then multiple disasters occur. So that complicates both the impact and the recovery. And mass violence is a disaster that research has shown has a longer recovery trajectory. Another model that helps us understand some of the specific needs of communities is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This model emphasizes the need to meet basic needs before higher needs can be effectively addressed. It applies to survivors, it applies to communities, and to disaster response professionals. We all have to remember to put our own masks on before helping others. At Tuesday's Children, we've relied for many years now on our long-term healing model. Our approach centers around building trust first and foremost, and building a nurturing community of support. We've learned with 9/11 and with military losses and wide-scale tragedies that people impacted by trauma and loss tend to isolate and not seek out traditional mental health services or supports. But programs like Tuesday's Children that build community and trust have had success in engaging these vulnerable groups. You can see some of our key lessons learned over the last 2 decades on this slide, and we are happy to talk about this more at any time. Here you can see a graphic depiction of how our model works. We start with community support. We use our long-term vision, our mission, an adaptable approach, and we commit to serving these populations. We create trust, we build community, we engage people, we assess their needs, and then we reassess their needs. And it really is cyclical because people's needs are evolving over time. And through this, we keep the promise, and all of this can lead to recovery and resilience in the families we serve. We invite you to learn more about our model and our online toolkit, where we have free training modules and interactive tools, and on our website, where we have tip sheets and other community resilience resources. In our community resilience and tragedy assistance work, we've been sharing our long-term healing model for more than 2 decades now with both international and domestic communities impacted by mass tragedies, and we continue to learn so much from them. We work with over 20 U.S. communities that have been impacted by mass violence, military conflict, trauma, and loss. And through our international program, Project Common Bond, we work with over 35 countries now as of this year. We also hold an annual forum and a speaker series such as this one around lessons in recovery and resilience. We're grateful to our speakers, our panels, our seasoned experts, and our resilient survivors who provide their incredible perspectives and their experience to these events. You'll hear today from some truly amazing people. These events are always free. You can sign up for our newsletter to be informed about future events, and you can visit our YouTube channel to see recordings of some of our past events. Tuesday's Children also has a COVID response project to build the capacity of key sectors that are interfacing with children and families to address COVID bereavement. You may not know, but there are more than 400,000 children in the U.S. alone who've now lost a parent due to COVID. And it has impacted certain communities into a higher degree. So we want to make sure that there's a safety net in place as those kids go through school systems, healthcare, and everything to address their evolving needs. Catherine, my colleague who you saw earlier, is the manager of this project, and we're seeking any and all collaborations with this project. We're trying to form a COVID Youth Council right now, so if you know any COVID bereaved youth who might be interested, please contact us. And then finally, I want to bring on my colleague Kathy Murphy to talk about an exciting initiative that one of our speakers today, Deanna Green, is a new member of.
Thanks, Sally. About 2 years ago, Tuesday's Children formed STOP, the Survivors of Tragedy Outreach Program, a coalition of organizations, survivors, and professionals committed to helping other communities recover from tragedies. You can see our partner organizations here, and we will soon be adding the Fudge Foundation to this list of partners. We want to show you a brief video about STOP and extend an invitation for others to join our efforts. We want to partner with response organizations, survivor-led organizations, compassionate professionals, and others who want to collaborate to make things better for communities recovering from mass violence and targeted violence.
I'm the father of Christina Morset. She's one of the 12 that lost their lives at the Borderline Bar and Grill in Thousand Oaks.
Following the murder of my 6-year-old son, Jesse McCord Lewis, in his first grade classroom at Sandy Hook Elementary School.
My cousin Ashley was in the Aurora theater shooting in July of 2012. She was permanently injured and lost her unborn child as well as her 6-year-old daughter, Veronica.
On April 15th, 2013, I was running the Boston Marathon, and as I was approaching the finish line, the first explosion was just ahead.
My father, Joseph J. Picior Jr., was killed in the September 11th attacks at the Pentagon.
Beginning on September 11, 2001, and for the past 21 years, Tuesday's Children has been supporting families going through trauma on their road to recovery. Our mission serves not only the 9/11 families and the first responder families, but also our military families, our families of the fallen, our international families who have been impacted by terrorism, and our communities who have felt the devastating effects of mass violence.
The
public knows that mass shootings and tragedies of this kind are devastating, but what they don't realize is the lingering effects. The need for a program like STOP, the need for Tuesday's Children.
STOP is a very important organization that brings together survivors of tragedy.
STOP is the Survivors of Tragedy outreach program, and it was created out of an unfortunate necessity.
We have this immediate recognition in each other. There's a validation there. There's this sense that somebody understands what you've been through.
To be able to meet together and to walk through this together.
STOP members have been through these instances of violence.
I know following Jesse's murder, within the first few days, I thought I may not survive. And I wish that there was an organization like STOP then that could have helped guide me.
What I like about Tuesday's Children is they just have a vast wealth of knowledge and experience.
STOP is raising awareness, not just of the fact that mass shootings, mass tragedies, terrorism, military conflict are happening, but we're raising awareness of the long-term effects of this.
And STOP is here to walk that journey with you.
The issue of mass violence is not going to go away.
When bad things are happening, look for the helpers.
Parents often say, you know, I'll never let this happen again, right? We can never let this happen again.
One person can do a lot, and you are that one person. So please join us so that we can come together and be part of the solution.
Thank you for that. Now it's my pleasure to welcome our first featured speaker, Dion Green, who's the founder and CEO of the Fudge Foundation. Dion, like me, is from Dayton, Ohio, and was directly impacted by the August 4th, 2019 mass shooting in the Oregon district. He survived that tragedy, but his father, Derek, did not. Dion has carried his father's legacy by creating the Fudge Foundation and by providing peer support, trauma and grief services, and advocacy locally and nationally. He's a mentor, a leader, an agent of change, an author, peer supporter to many survivors throughout the country. And we're proud to also now be able to include him as a member of our Survivors of Tragedy outreach program. You can read his full bio and the bios of all of our speakers on the workspace, the online workspace. And for those here in person, I think we have them printed out, but I'm not sure. Maybe I'm wrong about that. So Dion, I'd like to welcome you. I think we'll put this microphone on you in there.
Thank you, Dion, for being with us. For our first question, I'd like to ask you, what has been your experience with long-term recovery from an traumatic event? And what has helped you in your healing journey?
So, at the beginning of when it all happened, vitamin, so never would be counting. So people just said to get through it. I thought I could get through it on my own. But it was in a negative way. I was coping with alcohol and just doing things that wasn't positive. And then there was a point where I had a moment where I was exposed with anger, and I could look and see that my family was there, my daughter and her mother, and said it was time, so I reached out to a counselor, and I started getting the help that I needed, and ever since then I've been doing there every Thursday, and just having a safe space to be able to just share what I've been through and just let it out with no judgment. And one of the things that I do now for myself and for others, because I turn it into an event for others to be able to experience is, there's nothing like water and fire. So I love canoeing. I love being on the water and I love being around fire, because when you create a fire and you got the right people around you, it creates a conversation that's so in depth that it brings out what's not on the surface, it brings out what's deep down inside. So I'm just all about just connecting with Mother Nature and getting what's going on in the real world.
Thank you, Gian. Nature is definitely a great way to find healing. And I also think we can find it through others, and I know you have. So I'd like to ask you about peer support. How do you think peer support can help individuals who've been impacted by tragedies, like trauma and grief, especially men's violence, terrorism? And what have been some of your experiences with peer support? If they happen organically, can you tell us something about the value of it and just how that helps you?
I mean, I'm also a certified peer supporter in the state of Ohio, but the value to a peer supporter is lived experience. There's nothing like a bond between two people that you don't have to dig deep down and bring questions out of. It's an understanding networking. If you have not been through it, it's something that I cannot explain to you. And I would love to not have to be able to connect with you. But that means that you have been brought into a family that you didn't have to be a part of. But it's very valuable. It puts you in a space where people can reach. Just being able to share, to share with them what you've been through, share the steps that take you to when you're having low moments, it's leaning on each other. It becomes a family. And I just think peer support is very valuable in communities, and especially in communities of color. We need more people that look like me to be able to reach people that look like us. So just being able to show that vulnerability without no judgment is what you have to do, because they think we're not supposed to cry, but I'm human as well. And much as I try to hold on to it and be strong, I was breaking down. And I needed to be around people that show support, and that felt like what I've been through. And as I was going through my emotions, I always felt I was alone, but I'm not. So it definitely played a part, and it definitely has created beautiful connections in sad moments. But it's just, when I go to places like that, it's for them just to, I don't come with resources. I don't come like, this is what you need, this is that. Here's my heart, here's my shoulder, here's my ear. But 9 times out of 10, I'm crying with them because I'm still grieving. So, and putting myself back into them areas. I always re-traumatize myself, but for me to be able to move forward that day, that sometimes I question why I'm still here, it is my gift to be able to help others and inspire others that there's hope in a hopeless moment. Because when we go through them things, you don't know what tomorrow brings, you don't know what next week brings. But if you can see someone like me that has been through what you're walking through now, hopefully it radiates some type of hope that, hey, if he can do it, maybe I can. You might not be able to move at the same pace or level I have, but because we all breathe and heal differently, but hopefully that it instills something into you to be able to say, I can at least try, because each one of our stories, if you're able to speak, can impact someone's life, because you don't know who's sitting back in this room right now that's like, hey, I've been through that myself. But showing that vulnerability and letting them see that it's all right to not be all right, to speak up is the first step of trying to heal.
Absolutely. I think if we've learned anything from these horrific events, it's been the power of peer support. In your opinion, what are some of the biggest challenges faced by communities that have been impacted by mass violence or terrorism? And how can service providers effectively meet these needs?
I mean, it's the resources. As I always share when I go to these places, when these mass shootings happen or these community violence happen, the resources are right there. But that's not when we need them. We still have to put our loved ones in the ground first. We still have to wait for the process to kick in. We need those resources there when everybody disappears. But that's when, now, what could I have done different? What should I say? Should I say I loved him? Should I say I loved him? So we need those resources to be there. So that is why I created my organization, to be able to help those, because I'm not a regular 7 to 4 as people have their mental health breakdowns. Mine don't come to work hours. Mine's come at 2 a.m. at night. So I tell people to call me, whether you gotta cuss me out, whatever, however you gotta vent yourself, because it's always better out than in. Because when you hold it in, they said stress is the silent killer, but anger is very powerful as well. And, you know, in the situation what I had to go through, I always say I forgive, but I don't forget. But in order to do the work that he put me on, I have to forgive, because if I don't, my anger will consume my vision and I will miss all the blessings that he put in front of me to be able to help them. So just bringing, just being in the community, bringing education, bringing awareness, and just helping alongside others and walking them through there, because so many people wants to get involved, but we don't have directions. You know, a lot of people want to advocate, a lot of people want to do this, but in certain communities, we don't get that. We don't have that type of resource or people that can share us how to move forward. So I had to learn that through failure. But now what I've learned, I teach, because to be a leader, you have to be a servant of the people. So I serve the people to be a leader. And I don't consider myself a leader. I'm just doing what he's allowed me to do.
Thank you, Deanne. I think definitely organizations like yours and efforts in recovery in general are just very under-resourced, and that's why we're grateful, you know, to have the funding we do from the Department of Homeland Security and some of the other grants we have. That they're, you know, it's an appeal to funders to please support long-term healing work and please support communities, not just in the immediate aftermath, but really for the long haul as people's needs evolve. And I like what you said about anger. It makes me think about one of our 9/11 family members was, I saw him speaking once, and he was asked about, you know, wasn't he angry that his brother was murdered and didn't he want vengeance? And he replied that he was angry for a very, very, very long time. And then he started to realize that holding on to that anger was like holding on to a burning coal. It was burning him and hurting him more than it was doing anything else. So thank you. I want to ask you about how you work to address inequities. Basically what we're talking about, how you work to help support for marginalized populations, to reduce stigma, and to navigate sometimes really heavily politicized waters. I know you've been able to do something amazing in advocating for changes to the VOCA laws, the Victims of Crime Act in Ohio, in the state of Ohio, to make sure that victims' families are informed before news about cases comes out in the press. So I'd love to hear about some of that work.
Yes, so the reason why my foundation was created is in the state of Ohio, if you've been in trouble in the last 10 years, you will be denied victims of crime compensation. I got a denial letter and my father was in the ground and then asked, did you want to appeal? And when I did, looked at it and ripped it up and said, hate you with it. But then as I started to speak to other survivors that got shot at are still needing help and going through, I said, what can I do about this? Because if it's happening here, I know it's happening all over the country. So I created my foundation and I teamed up with our senator in Ohio, her name is Peggy Lehner, and we went to change the vote. The first year we got a lot of movement, but then Stand Your Ground came through, which the country wanted. So we got pushed out of lane session. Then we reapplied for it again, and it got signed into law. It got signed in December and went into effect in March of 2022. So now in Ohio, the VOCA, there's no more restrictions. They don't care if you have drug in your systems, and I made it retroactive for 3 years. So anybody that was in that shooting can go back and reapply. But there's still work to do. We still have to meet people where they're at. You still have people that can't read or can't write. The application process is very long and excessive. So we got to meet people where they're at and bring that. And that is one of the key things to bring a change is awareness. A lot of people don't know that these funds exist. And when you do call, not even the people that sit in the positions where I had to work with a family that her father, the kid's father got killed and he had a felony. So when she called the advocate office, the first question just bothers me. Does he have a felony? Like, who just asked that? But she said yes, so they denied. So she called me back. I said, well, here goes the revised code. Send that to them. But that lets you know people in the positions don't even know that that revised code has changed and stuff like that. So bringing awareness and just educational purpose to let people know that these things exist, because if I can help two families in an area that's not getting the resource they're supposed to get, they're gonna continue the movement because people in their community, if this happened, like, hey, I know about this, so it spreads like a wildfire.
Yeah.
So just education and awareness is just key. But, you know, as you said, it's hard when it comes to funding because it is the survivor-led organizations that are in those communities that are doing the work, but we don't get the money to do it. And any survivor that I talk to all over the country, I was always told you can never be the person you was when you experienced something so dramatic. I experienced something twice that. There's no way I can think about getting a job. The only job I think about is saving lives and how to create a better future. So it's just a process that I just got to continue to keep working and keep breaking barriers. Hopefully someone will listen and we'll get that change that we need and start showing the survivors, the families that are directly impacted, that are doing the work, the resources and the backing.
Yeah, thank you.
Your community and all the communities you've touched through your foundation are very, very lucky to have you so dedicated to them. One final question. You have engaged a bit with the Buffalo community already, and I hope that by being here, you will be able to make additional connections and offer peer support. Is there any message you would like to impart to this community and others that are more newly impacted by targeted violence?
You know, and if it gets emotional, I'm all right with this. But I always tell my first victory of the day is rolling over, putting 2 feet on the ground. Because anybody that hasn't been through something so dramatic directly, we tend to become hopeless. And it's all right because that's signs of trauma. But I just pray that they continue to put their feet on the ground, keep their voices loud, and keep demanding resources and change in this community. And whether that's bringing people from outside to join, much as I hate to say this, we are family. It's a network that none of us thought we would be in, with the family we never chose, but we are here. And, you know, this bothers me so much because they always say, Dion, at least you was there with your father in those last moments. Do you think I really wanted to be holding him? But that was when I was angry. But as I learned through the process, as any father or mother, what is the one thing you give your life up for? So my father got to leave this earth knowing that his son was still alive, and not laying beside him created something in me to continue to just move in places I don't even know how to move in, but he's gonna follow me through. So I just pray that the Buffalo community just keeps staying strong and just don't give up, because some days, every day seems hopeless. But we are the change and we are the voice, and somebody is listening, and change will come. It might not come overnight or next year, but we have to focus on our youth as our children, and we can at least try to do something. But if we don't do nothing, then we feel like we can't do nothing. So, I just pray that
Thank you, Dion. Can't thank you enough for sharing your experience with us and with this community and everybody tuned in. So thank you. We're going to transition now to share a message from our Survivors of Tragedy Outreach Program, of which Dion is a member. And I hope that those of you who are here in Buffalo, if you haven't connected with Dion already, that you will.
Well, we certainly acknowledge that peer support is something beyond holds true, and it is shared value of Tuesday's Children as well, our long-term healing model. Being part of STOP has been an opportunity to witness true value in peer support with a group that has different timelines, different types of trauma and loss, but inevitably, in each of our sessions, we organically land on a common theme that all participants can relate to. So before we introduce our next panel, we want to shift to share with you a joint statement that came out of our STOP sessions during this past year.
Thanks, Kathy. Our staff members have really been connected on so many levels, and they particularly come together when new tragedies occur and mass violence occurs in other communities. They want their message and their voices to be heard. In 2022, when the tragedy happened in Buffalo and in so many other communities, our staff members said, we have to say something, we have to do something. Let's make a joint statement. So you see the beginning of the joint statement here. We won't read it verbatim, but we'll give you a summary. Our survivors represent a national network and a deep bench of lived experience in recovery and in providing peer support to triage the multi-layered impact of tragedies.
What we are facing is not new. It is a problem that some of our members, some of our communities have been living with for more than 2 decades, and they truly understand the long-term nature of trauma, grief, and pain.
Their joint statement is a call to action for prevention, for long-term healing, and for everyone to push to do better. Stop and think, start thinking together.
Stop the arguing, start taking responsibility.
Stop the inhumanity, start addressing mental health issues in our society and providing timely support to those in need.
Stop focusing on the fringes and pay attention to the elephant in the room. Start systemic change to correct the many factors causing this problem.
Stop senseless violence killing our families and causing long-term trauma and grief. Start enacting effective prevention measures on state and federal levels.
Stop feeling scared and being silent. Start asking for help. If you suspect something, even in your own family, reach out to someone you trust.
Stop feeling like we can't solve this problem. Start turning up the volume, talk about this problem, and keep getting louder.
Those are some of the heavy but necessary actions. Our members further note that even if we can stop this, the work needs to continue. They remind us that the survivor community is finite now, but the degrees of separation are diminishing. Our members conclude that they are card holders to a club they never wish to belong to. This card has an inexcusable high price, and if we don't stop violence now, you or me will hold the card next.
Thank you, Kathy. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the moderator of our panel of local Buffalo voices, Chardonnay Young-Ford, who for the past year has been directing the Buffalo United Resiliency Center. Most of you in this room probably already know Char. The first time I spoke to her, I felt like I already knew her because I heard such wonderful things about her from so many different people. Particularly, the one thing I kept hearing from everybody is she is the one everybody trusts. And trust is the #1 thing needed to support individuals recovering from tragedies. So that's truly the best compliment that you could get, Char. Char is a native of Buffalo, born and raised on the east side. She has tremendous compassion, and she has an immense passion for advocating, for uplifting others, and for serving her community. She holds a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling with a bachelor's in legal studies, and she is currently a practicing mental health counselor in the community. And today we're so grateful to have her to moderate the panel. Welcome, Char.
Thank you. I don't think so. Okay, I'm going to introduce the rest of the amazing panel that we have today. I'm first going to introduce Fragrance Karen Stanfield. Fragrance is an artist and at the intersection of jazz, reggae, R&B, funk, soul, neo-soul, and inspirational music. All of her lyrics are for the intent of positively influencing the audience to raise their vibrations. She teaches at Buffalo Academy for Visual and Performing Arts and is a district advocate for the West New York area of the New York chapter of the National Association for Reporting Arts and Sciences. Outside of music and entertainment, Fragrance is married to Juan Stanfield and has 7 biological children, as well as 5 bonus children and 2 grandchildren. She loves being a mom, entrepreneur, homeschooler, and teaching artist. Thank you for being here today. Welcome. Our next panelist is Mark Talley. He is the founder and director of Agents for Advocacy. He was inspired to create this charity after his mother, Geraldine C. Talley, was killed in the top shooting on May 14th, 2022. Through his personal experiences, Mark has gained a deep understanding of the challenges that low-income communities face and is committed to using his skills and talents to make positive impact in these communities. Agents of Advocacy is dedicated to promoting socioeconomic equality and providing resources and services to those who need them the most. He also recently released the book, 514, The Day the Devil Came to Buffalo, which is available for purchase on Amazon, and it's also linked on our House Space page. Welcome, Mark. Our next panelist is Ebony M. White. Ebony is a native of Buffalo, New York, and she is currently the Community Engagement Manager at the Buffalo Center for Health Equity. Ebony received her undergraduate degree from SUNY Empire State University with a focus on community health. She has served her community by supporting several initiatives for over 10 years, providing leadership and inclusivity to impact the multifaceted healthcare disparities of Black and Brown communities. She's a trained restorative practitioner, life coach, trauma-informed care facilitator, and peer leader. All the mentioned training supports her community engagement efforts to promote disease prevention and capacity building opportunities for members throughout her community. Welcome, Ebony. And our final panelist today is Darnell Whitfield Jr. He is the former fire commissioner of the Buffalo Fire Department in Buffalo, New York, and a social justice advocate. He received national attention for spreading awareness of white supremacy and domestic terrorism after his mother, Ruth Whitfield, was killed in the 2022 Buffalo shooting. In an effort to raise awareness for white supremacy and domestic terrorism in the United States, he testified in the United States Judiciary Committee. And in June 2022, he was featured as a speaker at the March for Our Lives protest held in Washington, D.C. Welcome, Darnell. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to give this microphone to the panelists, but I'm not sure if it's working so well. So I'm going to have to Thank you all for being here today. We're going to start with the general round table and ask a few questions. So each of you have been directly impacted by the 514 mass shooting in Buffalo, each in different ways. I know myself, I'm working with community with stigma, inequities, politics, and previous, but stigma traumas have made recovery more difficult. Basic needs were a great concern to many, and in many cases still are. What are some of the challenges each of you have encountered over this past year, and what are some of the ways you have navigated these challenges? Fergus, I'll start with you. Can you share your perspective on this as a customer relations manager at Cox, as a supporter of many of the other employees there, and as a direct provider of this tragedy?
So the main challenge that I've experienced as a survivor of the massacre is that I'm a survivor. Unfortunately, for the majority of the year, directly after the tragedy, I was not treated as a survivor, not acknowledged as one, but more as a witness. They know I was there. Everyone knows I was present. They know my story, and they know what happened to me, and unfortunately also to my daughter, who were present. But we were treated as witnesses, so we're good for getting what happened to us. What happened to you? Can you walk us through that day, etc. So constantly re-traumatizing ourselves for what we think is helping the community to understand what happened and what needs to happen for us, how they can help us and that sort of thing. But it really was more, what can they do for the community? And we were kind of pushed to that. So that was the main challenge. We have now, a year later, been acknowledged as survivors, so I'm grateful. No matter it took a year, but I'm grateful that that has occurred. Now that we are acknowledged as survivors, we just need to be treated with more dignity, which we still have not been given, is the dignity and respect that we were not standing in the welfare line when this happened, but we were at work. So my colleagues and I, unfortunately, are still being treated as if we are asking for handouts because we don't want to do for ourselves, not because we are unable to function as we did prior to this situation. So that is the greatest challenge that we've been dealing with, and getting others to understand that has been extremely difficult. So we're still working, but I'm not quite enough. So
Thank you for sharing that. That is actually common that we hear most people about, but there's a lot of inequity that have not been acknowledged. Thank you for sharing. Mark, you have engaged in advocacy since the tragedy, established your own organization, and have written about your experience losing your mother and about your relationship with her. How has her life and life lessons helped you navigate?
Can you just repeat that question? Because I think we're not picking up the audio very well. Sorry. Thanks, Charlie.
Mark, you have engaged in advocacy since the tragedy, established your own organization, have written about your experience losing your mother and about your relationship with her. How has her legacy and life lessons helped you navigate this past year?
My mother was very extroverted. She was also kind of ironically with that, soft-spoken. She really didn't get into people's faces that much when she felt disrespected, or when she wanted to, she just felt she needed to get something off her chest due to any disrespect perceived. I'm about 180 from that. I'm very quick to get in a person's face. If I feel verbally disrespected, or if I have to, as I say, verbally press someone to get my point across. If I think I'm dealing with somebody that's lacking intelligence in that moment, don't know how to read the room correctly. So looking at everything my mother went through, I learned from the things, how she acted and how she didn't act it. And I'm just applying that to myself and my organization.
Thank you so much, Frank. Thank you for sharing. Ebony, in your line of work, you deal directly with health equity. What has been your experience navigating supports in the wake of 514 and trying to provide equitable recovery support for the community and for yourself?
Thank you for that question. So I would say, because on 513, I was working in the space of inequities, whether it was mental health, whether it was healthcare delivery, and all of the things that African Americans deal with in our region. I felt like I had a little edge of finding the right resources for our community partners. And I found that I had to keep moving over this past year. There was no sabbatical, there was no time off, not because it was imposed on me, but it was important for me. It was part of my healing. I think when I talked to Kathy and others, being African American, you are a moving target. There are multiple things that can get you. It can be health, it's all systemic. And in this case, the racist attack at TOPS, which was generated based upon race merely, nothing else, which is foundational and embedded in many of our systems. I found myself being extremely grateful for the tribe, my work family, my personal family that were critical to me being able to stay above water, right? When I needed to kind of have a meltdown, I meltdown. They kind of like, God, because I lost my uncle in that space, and then just really for him, he was a community health worker. Like he knew where everything was, who you needed to talk to. So that is my strong suit. But this past year has been very difficult because there are organizations that are identified and already established. But then there was this rise up, if you will, of new leaders that you had to kind of coordinate and give support to because their voice mattered too. They may not have a large backing, but they needed some that. And sometimes you just need to find the appropriate linkage, and which is my skill set for them. So it was important that we were immersed out of this past year, and keeping the community's voice always the voice, even despite my great loss as well.
Stephanie, thank you so much for sharing that. I agree that it was very much to keep community, well, the impacted community at the forefront, because they are the ones who Barnett, by training, we're a first responder and a very experienced. As a former commissioner of the Buffalo Fire Department, how have you applied those skills in navigating the aftermath of 5/15 and in your social justice advocacy efforts?
Thank you for that question. I think that probably more so than others, this is, I'm used to dealing with these types of events, obviously never with my mother, but in the case of responding to emergencies over the past many years, you know, you're taught how to compartmentalize, you're taught how to respond, you know, appropriately and effectively. And so, you know, many of the things that I learned over the course of those 2 years have been a blessing to me in the last year. You know, one of the things that we do is we prepare, we respond, you know, and you know, we look at how, you know, what could go well, mitigation, and we, you know, that's just a cycle that we continuously go through. And so I apply that to pretty much every aspect of my life, including this one. The problem being is that just, you know, how do you prepare for something like this? No matter what I've done, nothing prepared me for that moment. But I have been able to use some of the attributes and the lessons learned over the course of my career since then to try to do sort of.
Thank you so much. Not only has 5/14 devastated the East Buffalo community, but this has been a difficult few years with the pandemic, previous and ongoing community violence, discord over racial injustice, blizzards, food insecurity, many mass shootings occurring within a few weeks of 5/14, and the overall heightened frequency of tragedy in the U.S. and abroad. How would each of you say those extenuating circumstances have factored into the recovery of individuals and of this community as a whole? What can we do to bridge some of the divides and close up some of those gaps in support? I'll start with Ivan. So how would each of you say those extenuating circumstances, for all those things and all those layered traumas that we've experienced in the community, how have those factored into your recovery as individuals and of those of this community as a whole? What can we do to bridge some of the divide and close some of the gaps in support?
I think the main thing that we need to do is continue to have conversations such as these and include all the voices that are necessary. Make sure that we're on the same page even when we're communicating. We're talking about the community, or we're talking about the impact of community. We're talking about mass violence or targeted mass violence. I mean, there are some very, it seems so small, the differences, but the ripple effects and the impact that it has are great differences. So it's very important that we acknowledge that those things are different. Acknowledging that, just like they've lost their parents in this, so they are survivors of this tragedy, and I was a survivor of the tragedy because I was present that day, and the differences between those things. A lot of times educating our community and educating those who are listening to even these conversations, letting them know the differences between those things, because everyone is not on the same page. Also, when it comes to situations such as this, a lot of people don't have a book you're reading from as to what needs to be done next. So even if I don't have a background in certain things, or it's not listed on my bio, for example, no one here knows that I have a background in psychology with behavioral health. We don't talk about that, but I shouldn't have to, as long as my voice and the things that I'm saying are relevant and make sense for the conversation that we're having. So I think first we need to start with that. We need to give everyone a voice, give everyone some dignity and some respect, and take time to listen to individuals, see where they're coming from, add that information into the conversation, and then use those voices for solutions. And that's just, and be willing to take some criticism, especially with the blizzard. When we bring that up and bring that into this conversation as well, there was a little bit of criticism, some disagreements, even with politicians in the situation, and they didn't really want to take that criticism or leave it on the table. We kind of retracted it when we really need to talk about the problems that we're having here in Buffalo. Everyone needs to work together. We obviously needed more help, and we needed some more voices in here so that we can really see what's happening and work with them.
Thank you so much for that. Mark, what was your response?
Oh, that's okay. On a micro level, here just in the city of Buffalo, more funding to low socioeconomic communities, particularly funding and education, health, and mental awareness on the east side of Buffalo. We literally have the worst statistical rates when it comes to education, mental illnesses, cancer, preventable, and preventable diseases, STDs. So we definitely need more funding in those departments. On a macro perspective, America needs to acknowledge its racist history. I mean, this is the week, I believe, it's the anniversary of Black Wall Street. We were the original forms of currency. America was built off the sweat, equity, and blood of our ancestors. If anybody born after 1965, we're one of maybe 2, 3 generations of African Americans that were born in this country that can truly say, we were free, we're equal to our white counterparts. But I highly doubt anybody born after that would say we're equal. I mean, we're still treated as, last year I said second-class citizens, but you constantly see the deaths of Black men being shot to death with no questions, either questions being asked afterwards or no questions being asked at all. It kind of make you feel like you're maybe even a third-class citizen in the country that you were born in. So I would definitely say one of the main things is America has to start having these hard conversations of why are we still being treated less than other people.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you for that.
Coordination. Coordination is critical. So when we talk about position, we talk about response. We've had some of the same players, okay, whether they're not-for-profit, governmental agencies that are responsive. I think there's a revamping. There's definitely needs to be a revamp. And sometimes it needs to be led, community-led. When I think about, our first responders, and even with the criticism, there's a great risk in being a first responder. And you have to look at that through the lens of humility. Yes, that's their job, but they risk their life every day going into those spaces. And we talk about all of the things that they have to do. And I look at them, they're people too. So what did the system provide for them? So again, it's resources, but how they delegate it. In delegation, it just can't be, you can't write the rules and play the game, especially when it impacts your community at large. You need to be in the room when the rules are written, so that's the politics. We need to be in that room. We need to talk about that. We need to talk about the resources that we have internally as a community. So when I think about the storm, we had food, but we had no access to it because that's a different jurisdiction. So somebody had no power, but there was a generator there, but I can't access it. So we have to talk about how communities and accountability and how we take care of each other. And even in our policy, how we don't realize there's a domino effect. When you touch one thing, you're going to impact something, but here's the end user, the people. They're the beginning and the end. So for us to be successful, we have to really look at a revamping and not be afraid of revamping. You try it your way. Try new, so don't be afraid of that. Yeah, for sure. Resources are always important, but we want to make sure they get to the people that they're attending.
I agree. I mean, that's a challenging after the shooting, the response wasn't as high as it should have been. I appreciate that. Thank you. Right now.
Yeah, I would agree with everything said thus far in the panels, but we're here under the auspices of Homeland Security. We've seen the spirit things. The day we evolve something like this. One of the things that I learned over the course of my career in public safety is forming relationships and partnerships within the community. That's what allows you to be successful in emergencies and other response, moments or whatever. So you have to have a relationship and needs established before something happens. That outreach has to happen before something happens. But you talked about what is exacerbated our recovery since 2014. You named a myriad of things, but I would submit to you that the trauma that I carried, and should have everybody did not start with 514. We have a lot of things going on well before 514. 514 exacerbated the pre-existing conditions already. So when you talk about recovery, I would submit to you, what are you talking about recovery? I mean, that would be the question. Because if you're talking about recovery, real, then you're talking about something bigger. And when you start talking about our condition in this world, in this country, it's intentional. It's not by accident. It's intentional. And until we are ready to deal with that issue and start addressing that intentionality with the same intentionality, then we are not going to be able to recover. So, I'm not trying for me myself, I'm not trying to recover to where I was on 513. Something was wrong on 513, as you said. So we have to look much further than 514 and start talking about recovery. This is good. This is certainly 514 happened. We're traumatized by that, and we want to deal with that. But it's much bigger than that. I don't think that we can successfully talk about recovery, restoration until we deal with life. White supremacy.
I agree with that trauma that we as Black people often experience, and it really does. You really need to start having those very direct, comfortable conversations.
Yeah, I mean, you should stop the violence. All these things perpetuate intention. This, this white supremacy instead of these are more intentional things. You're not going to stop any of those things until you deal with that.
Thank you so much. Okay. So with that a bit deeper, will we ask for recommendations for ways to destigmatize, depoliticize, and improve efforts and long-term healing, both in Buffalo and other communities impacted by target violence and extensive trauma and grief? I'll start with Evan. What do you believe is the role of interprofessional collaboration in supporting individuals and communities impacted by mass violence, terrorism, or other broad-reaching community practices?
I think Darnell already touched on it. It's important that we already have pre-existing relationships that are respected and not perpetuated because it comes at sympathy. And there's a difference between sympathy and empathy. I think sometimes you get a lot of sympathy for you, pity on you. You don't need that. We need change. Okay. And everything that has come is symptomatic of a real diagnosis of racism. Okay, that's the diagnosis for us in our community, in all of the other urban communities, but all of the other things that's happening that have been generated based upon that. With those interpersonal relationships, we need to understand what each other's motives are. Sometimes the motives don't be good, and it comes with time. You can have a job, but I really want, people may have a job, but you want to ensure that the job that they have is truly their passion. And you have to also know when you're not getting it done, right? You have to kind of move to the side, like whatever your motivation is, if it's not moving the needle, if you really want outcomes, sometimes you gotta bow out. Just bow out. Like, you might be better at administrator, but if there's someone that can lead the charge, let them lead it. And you have to do it together, because you can't do it siloed. What happens to one of us happened to all of us. When we look at 514, there were people in complete different cities, like, oh my God, I feel bad. Like, so it created this fear. We knew it existed, but it was like the boogeyman is here. Like, it's here. We know it exists, but we kind of operate in a way like we kind of like, yeah, you know, they don't really like us too much over there. That street is okay, but that street not okay. And you just try to exist with something that really doesn't want you here at all. But that's why it's really important that those ally relationships that you have address it with you. You know, so if you're my ally and you are this race, I need you to address this with me, because the people on your street, your organization really don't care for me, or they don't treat me well, or the people that look like me. So those interpersonal relationships get things done because we're in multiple facets and different scopes, and these scopes have a shared benefit, and we have to understand what that shared benefit is. Again, what is your motivation and what is the outcome that you seek is critical.
Thank you so much. I mean, I think what we found when responding to the tragedy, and then again after 1 year of that, it was so disjointed, the work was so silent that it wasn't really a team effort, and it just became chaotic instead of really healing centered, and it forced the surviving family to choose. I'm going to this event, I'm going to that event, instead of actually being something that was led by them, informed by you all, so that it could really be healing who it was designed to be. So next we have Darnell. With the current rise in mass violence, shootings, and target violence, what steps can be taken to prevent these events? And how can communities prepare to respond to these events if they do occur?
Yeah, I would just reiterate something I've already said. When we're talking about mass violence, that's a new phenomenon.
Right.
I mean, and to some degree it is with the proliferation of these weapons and all that. I understand that this has been happening every day in our communities since time immemorial. This is not a new phenomenon. How do you prepare for that? How do you prepare for people running around with weapons of war? That's acceptable in our society. So how would we prepare for that? So we teach our children to run, hide, and do all these kinds of things like that. And that is like somebody said something, you said something about diagnosis. If you're sick and something's wrong with you, you go and seek a diagnosis. Based on that diagnosis, there is a treatment. Okay? And sometimes you can treat it, and sometimes it's untreatable, and it has to be removed. And that's kind of where we're at in America. Gun legislation is good, mental health, that's all good, that's all necessary. Those are all outgrowths of a more sinister thing. Those are all here because of this belief in white supremacy, white nationalism, this entitlement, this privilege. That's what we have to do. At the end of the day, we can run, hide, fight, we can do all of those things, we can do all those kinds of things, but that's not going to mitigate this issue. That's not going to keep us safe. That's not going to bring equity to this, to us. It's not going to do any of the things that we need to do. And so those are not solutions to our problem. That's a treatment plan that will allow us to live a little bit, that doesn't make us really safe. It doesn't give us hope. It does nothing. It does none of those things. That's putting a Band-Aid on sucking chest skin. You don't get out, and that's kind of where we are. And so that's why these conversations are important, that when we get people in the room from different backgrounds, from different walks of life, and share our stories and share our truths in an honest and open way. So we can deal with this. Not to blame people, but if we want to, we have a problem, we need to resolve it, we need to deal with it. And the only way we're going to do that is by being honest and open. Not by denying our history, taking books off the shelves and rewriting history. All of these things are being done to keep us from being honest, to keep us from dealing with the issue. And so we got to decide, do we want to deal with this issue? At the end of the day, I mean, these groups, these things are nice, but we got a whole other segment of society that's saying, no, this is not what we want. And so as a country, as a society, we have to decide, what is it that we want? Make that our priority, and we need the difficult work of bringing that, into fruition.
Thank you so much. That is excellent. Mark, how do you think support services can be made more accessible and culturally sensitive to individuals and communities impacted by non-Black services?
Bring it to 514. I think we already have a lot of that right now. I know even myself, Pastor Giles, Open Buffalo, the Resiliency Council, was it Erie County? United Way.
United
Way Restorative Justice. See, all of these, I think we have a lot of these right now in the community to support, help people mental health. But with the people in the community who I'm talking to, they say they're okay. We're okay with the mental health part. It's, now a year later we can't afford our rent. A year later we can't pay groceries. We can't get none of this. And it seems like they have all of these organizations willing to just help them with one aspect of socioeconomics, but not the other four. And I believe, there's nothing wrong with talking about this, because if we don't talk about it, as alluded to what Dion said earlier, it'll just, burn in your soul and just you won't be able to overcome it. But at the same time, we need to figure out a plan on how we can prevent this. We need to figure out a plan on why did this ever occur at all? How was it easy for him to buy this tactical gear, go off the tops that day? I don't know if anybody here watched the video, but I watched it, unfortunately, 5 times. But how was he able to get out of his car and just walk up the tops? How was he able to walk up and you really didn't see anybody you didn't see nobody afraid? How was he able to do this? How was he able to continuously write these manifestos or his plans on all of these far-right social media sites? How was he able to talk to a gentleman about it prior, what he wanted to do? So I think we have enough, we have enough counsel with it. We just don't have enough of everything else. I mean, now I'm not going to speak for none of the other survivors that were on tops that day, but I'm pretty sure it'll be easy for them if they want to get some counseling right now. But what's not easy is, my rent is it's one inflation. My rent just went from $1,500 to $2,500, and I was already struggling at $1,500. I have 2 kids, back to, school is about to start. I know with the back to school drive I had last year, you know, it cost me close to $15,000 to get all those supplies. So I can only imagine how it is for maybe a single parent, 3 kids that's already struggling to pay rent, already behind on bills. Now they have to buy food. Now they have to get school supplies. And a recent report just came out, if you're a parent, you have a child, it's going to cost close to $1.5 million to raise that child up to turn 18. So I think mental health is kind of the fancy umbrella term that corporations, other nonprofits, and even myself, I had a mental health thing too. But I think it's kind of a fancy umbrella term because people aren't ready to talk about the real things people, you know, here in the East Side community are really facing, because there's no specific answer. I mean, you know, I had people in the community, you know, they see you on TV, they think you're rich. I can tell you right now, that's not true. You know, they reach out to you with so many sob stories. And I'm not saying sob stories as you know, being sensitive, but they will just make you sob how they need all of this money to do stuff just to take care of their family. And it's like, you know, what do you say to somebody, say, you know, I'm trying to take care of my mother. She needs this surgery because she has diabetes, but she doesn't have health insurance. So now a hospital, they need $10,000 to take care of her. And they're working a part-time job while they're still trying to go to school. And they have 2 kids. I mean, it's only so much, you know, mental health counseling I help you with. But unless you're not having, you know, unless you hit the lottery, you know, it's going to be hard for any type of company or organization to give you that money.
Thank you, Mark. I agree with that. And I think when I was acting director for the Resilience Center, I too found that as being a challenge. Because I conversed with youth older families and a lot of providers regularly, and I would tell our funders that we needed to provide actual services. And it came down right before I resigned. They were hyper focused on the direct service, and I said, no, that's the ask of our community. That's what we need to give them. It's not a hyper focus or an ability to be objective. It's to say this is what the actual need is, how we need that. Because if they're not meeting their basic needs, how can they worry about the other parts? It really speaks to massive hierarchy. How can they address the rest if those basic needs are not met? They're worried about how to send their kids to school, or what they're going to be, or if their apartment is going to be what they're going to get evicted. So I appreciate that perspective.
I think you just said a lot better than me. And less time, it's hard to focus on mental health if you got this.
It is the truth. Is that uncomfortable conversation? It's the truth. Thank you. Okay, Trevor. So you have highlighted some of the compounding ripple effects survivors and top supporters have faced. How can we better address these needs and offer adequate support to survivors, both those who were injured and those who have visible wounds of trauma?
I think it starts with acknowledging what this tragedy was. So I know we're talking about the overarching and the macro and white supremacy and gun laws and a lot of other things that are issues in our society. But when this tragedy happened, which happens a lot, the reason we all had trauma on 5/13 is because when the trauma happened to us, it wasn't addressed. It wasn't addressed directly because we still have all this overarching macro economic stuff that needs to be done, right? But when a tragedy such as this happens, and it happened to us, and me specifically, so I was able to see it from a different point of view at this time, we can see that the problem is we have all the agencies and everyone who comes to do things, but we don't focus on the bullseye. There were people in the store. There were people in the parking lot. There were people who had to either run, hide, or die. And it's unimaginable. And people say it to me all the time. And to me, it's still unimaginable. My brain still hasn't accepted everything that happened that day, everything that we saw, everything you just talking in general, like you brushed over something about it. I think you mentioned the video, and it's just the trauma response. Like you're constantly taken back to that day. So what we don't do is we don't start there. Yes, we have all this other stuff going on, but we didn't start here with this tragedy. Let's start at the bullseye and let it ripple outwards, because the trauma is rippling outward, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. And even though we had trauma before that, this particular trauma is still rippling outward. So if we could stop that ripple, then we can go deeper. Let's start with layer one. Then we can move to the next layer. Then we can move to the layer after that. So yes, I did have trauma on 5/13, but on 5/14, something changed. And it was a change that we all knew happened to me. You didn't know what my trauma was on 5/13, but you all know what my trauma was on 5/14. Could we address the trauma on 5/14 and move there? Let's deal with that. Let's let the response to that ripple outwards. And when you do that, and you respond to that, and give some healing to that, or at least get to the point where we can start healing from it, then we can discover what the layer is underneath it. Oh, well, let's address that. And then we can discover if there's another layer underneath that. Well, let's address that. Because we're doing it backwards. And we've been doing this long enough to know it doesn't work. So that's the issue, and that's been the issue for me and my colleagues. A lot of them thought, because the focus was on white supremacy, the focus is on gun laws, the focus is on the community, the focus is on Black America as a whole. So they're like, well, I'm just gonna try to get back to my regular every day and see how that works. Didn't work. I didn't do that because I already have had mental, health issues in my past and in my family. So, like Mr. Whitfield said, I had already a predisposed ability to compartmentalize and to respond in a different way. I was able to push my trauma to the side on some days and go out there and work as a peer, whatever I was needed at the time. I did get those phone calls, like he said, in the middle of the night. I was that person, call me anytime, even though I have 7 children and 2 grands, and one of my children was actually at this event. I still made myself available because I have the ability to be available. Now, I may be in the bed for 3 days after I'm available, but I had the ability to do it, so I did that. But I noticed that just didn't happen for us. For, even for the families, I'm sure at some points you were looking like the response wasn't really geared to you. It was geared to all these things that led up to this event. All those things existed on 5/13. We weren't addressing it on 5/13. So why is that the first thing we're addressing on 5/14? It doesn't, you want to listen?
What you do about all this is that their experience is different. You know what I'm saying? And that's not been recognized. That is not been acknowledged. We get lumped together. And there's just a one size fits all response.
Right.
If at all. And the truth of that is that they're among us, they're here, they're living with this trauma. My mother, her uncle, his mother are not. And so it stands to reason that we can't really focus on our loved ones because they're not here. Yours are here, you're here. And so it's a different response. We're trying to get at the root of something else here. And you're here, living with that every day. And I think that the responses that we have to these kinds of things have to be tailored, to your individual experience. It's not a one size fits all. You know, and we already were in different places on 513, on 514 already. So we brought all that back in. But you're right, you're here and you witnessed that. And so that's with you every day. You know, I was there, I didn't witness it, I did just afterwards, you know. But my focus is on my mother being taken from us in the LA. Now, that's really my focus. And so I just want to publicly acknowledge, you know, what you're carrying and what the other people on cops are carrying that were there in that store. And I'm not making myself and what I'm going to do important. I'm focusing on my loss and my issue and my trauma. And I know you have some too, so I just want to publicly acknowledge that.
Exactly. And I think there is no one size fit all, and it's not about up and in, like it's not radio back. You was in the store, but you're alive. But I lost my loved one. We're not gambling, like that's not what we're doing. And it's still traumatic. And it wasn't intentional, it was not done by us. Right. It was done by us. That focus right there. You know, okay, yeah, and let's go through it, and we know you were in there, and we know that you are people, you have children, and all the people, so I was there shortly after, and I just remember the flood. I remember seeing you like running, I was in shock, as my uncle laid out on the pavement for a very long time. It's traumatic being black. It is. So when I say 513, it's traumatic being black. Because of the systemic, all of the other infrastructure, whether it's you being employed, workforce, wherever it is, it's traumatic. But then something that you thought had left in terms of racism, you know, racism, like, I don't think they don't like me enough that they will hunt me and pursue me and kill me. That's what happened. So for my generations back, I'm like, I thought this had stopped. You know, we still see it on television, and they made it very episodic, but it's not. Just episode. It's constant, and it's a buildup. So what we see was a buildup of gun violence and intervention being done in our community, because this is what's done to. But I need you to go on the cotton. Okay, I need you to give them some information, because there's a miscommunication about who we are as a people. We're valuable just like you. And we kind of generated all of our efforts on who it's done to and not who's doing it. That's it. And again, I totally concur that I see you, I hear you, I pray for you, even in restorative practice. I've sat in spaces and my heart aches for what you have to live with. And in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. Like, this is what they live with every day, and they are expected to return back and function well. So to mental health is what keeps you going. If you're not, there's nothing is detached from you. It all starts up here. So if this is not well, how you operate in the world won't be well. And when we talk about social determinants of health, we have a multitude of those that make it very difficult for us to be healthy. Very difficult.
Thank you so much, Melanie, for saying that, and thank you, Brenda. And I know that was emotional for you, Brenda, Master, you've been wanting for the last year, and not just because of the other survivors. So thank you on behalf of them, because I hope they're watching, and I hope that was healing for them. So all of these have personally been impacted by trauma and grief, yet all are working as advocates, some professionally and some informally, to guide others through these waters. We are always concerned about vicarious trauma, but especially when you yourself have been impacted. What protective factors such as peer support, self-care, or other wellness tools have been helpful to help you while advocating for others? So I'll start with Mark.
Again, I say, what's up me about most of this past year? Number one is, like I said earlier, I'm a very introverted old soul. So when my mother knew I was kind kind of low on the emotional scale. I mean, it is too many family barbecues that she has invited me to that I had to turn down because I didn't want to be around nobody except for her. You know, looking back, you know, you kind of, I kind of wish I would have said at least yes to one of those. But, you know, it's just me being introverted, me having just a low emotional tolerance. As I was telling Garnell earlier, I'm just quick to cut people off if I don't want to talk to them or don't want to listen to them. And, you know, that definitely helped me a lot over the past year. Another thing, once again, getting back to what Dion said about the gentleman he spoke with who had that ball of hatred in his heart. I still have mine, and I can pretty much say confidently, I'm sure it'll probably never go away. But instead of it taking control of me, I'm just trying to use it to more positive actions with the stuff I'm doing, my organization and stuff I'm doing with my book. So I'm definitely positive. My personality has definitely changed a lot since I found out the news, but a good coping mechanism for me over the past year has really been helpful. It's just using all the hate, anger, and rage and putting it into all the community stuff I'm doing. And just to go back, I promise to keep it short, just to further comment on what you said in the past about why people were talking about 514 instead of once again, everything, as we all said, everything after 514 was there, 513. But I always tell people, how much money do you think they made off of 514 instead of 513? I mean, it's a lot of companies, organizations that have made millions, unfortunately, off this Black pain and trauma. I always say, how much do you think those Choose Love and Hate Stop Racism shirts made? And how much money do you think got funneled back in the community?
Wow. Thank you for that. Sounds very good. I'll pass it on to Evan.
Helping and feeling for me continues to be. I have very clear boundaries. I know my shortcomings. I have a strong faith base that kind of keeps me and people around me. I would probably say I can keep going, but someone will say, no, hold on, or go sit down. You need somebody that you respect to say, go sit down. It'll be here tomorrow. And I understand what I have the capacity to do. And I want to do it not leaning on anyone. You know, if things are triggering and it's just too much, I know to step back because I don't want to cause any undue harm, any unnecessary harm to anyone that comes to me for support in one way or the other, whether it's leaders, etc. But I just learned to be kind to myself and still find the joys of life. I couldn't even go through how much trauma I've had and lived and endured. And I said, if I was to sit still long enough, it would probably bury me. So I choose to keep moving at different paces, sometimes faster than others, but still finding the enjoyment of life and trying to, if I inspire good, that remains the intention. I'm just showing up the way I was designed to show up. So hopefully if you find inspiration and keep going in a forward direction.
Thank you. Garnell.
Yes, I would probably.
Can you hold the mic a little lower because we're getting feedback? Just move your hand down the handle. There you go. Perfect. Thanks. Thank you.
I would say, first and foremost, my faith. I believe in God. That's what sustains me. That's what sustained my mother. That's what she poured into us. So I try to live my life in a way that based on my faith, based on my belief. we reunited, you know, at some point in time. Until then, we know, we can do, you know? So we think. Everything in my life is prepared me for this moment. You know, whether it's, you know, professionally or otherwise. Thank you for that. I look forward to being part of these things that we all see. Especially family, you know, that loves me, supports me. Very familiar with therapy and all of those things. Used to, you know, people prepare for work in spaces like service and other things. So I'm very familiar with all those things. And building myself on them. And although I will continue to do well.
With them that will round it out this person. Protective actions for the year, like I think so, helping, pushing for change. Trying to figure out what I was doing as well. Or it's just something that's different to you. So I continue to be the person that you made me be, which seems to be an already type of person. So I taking time to give a little more care to myself, because I've always been a person who gives 175% and usually have nothing left when it comes to me. So since I am still breathing, I make sure I take a day of 7. It's a challenge, but it's worked out as well. I'm a little more encouraging to because the routine keeps me focused. Now, we mentioned it in the bio and where else, but also my peers, being able to sit and do this has helped me. Interview, conversation, therapy, and peer groups. It's really. I know how we call her. It's been a blessing.
Thank you all. So at this time, we'll open up the floor to the audience and then go virtually to ask any questions that you have for the panelists. Unless you want to project.
First of all, first of all, I just want to say, thank you all, because I know how hard it is to share it. You can understand that every time you share our story, we got to do for a moment. So being related is just sitting here speaking that it's just powerful in itself. I'm going on 4 years. Some days my sleep on it. So, and when I tell people some days I might be able to speak thoroughly. Some days I might not be able to make it through 2 words, but I'm all right with that. And people need to understand that this pain don't go away. You know, as Mark said, man, I'm proud that you started to learn your self-management and awareness about your anger, instead of letting it consume you, can put it in what you're doing to create, you know, things in the community, because it never goes away. It sits there, you know, but some people allow it to take over. And just seeing you be able to acknowledge that, man, is one of the strongest things for us in this fight, to know our stressors and our triggers. So to be able to acknowledge that is very, very key. And to the young ladies, I know that means that she stays on the go, but sometimes you gotta, because you can't pour to me with a empty cup, so you gotta fill yours up sometimes. And what people gotta understand, it's all right for us to say no. It's all right to say no and step back. You know, the problems, too bad, they're gonna still be there, but they'll be there when we come back. So we gotta take care of ourselves, because people tend to think, oh, we're better now, but they see us out here trying to lead by example. But now we're the ones that's here that's doing the work, so we gotta protect ourselves. And you know, as far as faith, you know, I'm a man of faith. None of this is possible without him. You know, so just allow me to keep working through you and through a horrible situation, because I always share the story. And he takes us to everything starts with a choice and has an impact. So that situation happened, he had a choice to step back and not do nothing. Sometimes these situations make you a stronger person than you was before. But it's all about stepping into it. And from hearing from y'all, I just applaud y'all. And I'm here with y'all in any shape or form I can be. Thank you.
Any other questions? Do you have any from the online chat? Well, at this time, to close us out, I'm going to ask each speaker to share more about how those virtually knows that you can find out about your work, your website, and other resources. Yeah.
So we have one day of eyewitness leads called the pursuit of truth. It's pursuit of truth, one word, .co. There's information here, but we're really fledgling, and so we're just starting out without this path. But we look forward to working with all the organizations that are doing this work locally and around our country. Very excited about that opportunity. That's how you get in touch.
Okay, so you can reach me at ewhite@buffalohealthequity.org. Our organization is not a deliverer of services, however, we are convenient and an amplifier. So we address community engagement, community advocacy, between legislation and policy, also research. We have several arms, and it's imperative. So for me, I get the honor and the privilege to see all of the intersectionality of projects and partners and partnerships and bringing them together, with it all centered around community voices. Check out our website, see some of the things that we're doing. And if you would like to be a partner, come and join us, because we are cultivating change.
Thank you, Mark.
And once again, my name is Mark Talley. I'm the executive director and founder of Agents for Advocacy. Our primary mission and vision statement is to spread awareness on systemic racism and socioeconomic inequality, so we can foster a reality someday in which one's race, one's environment doesn't dictate one's future. Please feel free to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. I'm also an author. I recently just came out with a book on, unfortunately, I wish I could say a different word other than anniversary. Seems kind of too festive, but on the 1-year anniversary of the 5/14 attacks, the book is called 5/14, The Day the Devil Came to Buffalo. As of right now, over 300 copies have been sold. So please feel free to get your copy. It's available on Amazon. Also, once again, If you want to stay up to date on the latest stuff that we're doing, just follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn.
So, I have a website, vacancydraft.com. I'm an artist, so prior to all this, I made 5 albums, but since this, I have released 2 singles that are more related to the response to debilitating trauma. I've never experienced debilitating trauma until this. So my music has always been about change and about how we think and the results of the actions we take based on how you think. So what you think, say, and do. But even more so now. So if you want to follow me on all social media as Fragrance of Young, you can look anywhere. My email as well as info@fragranceofyoung.com. And I am on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, etc.
Thank you so much. And I just want to thank all of you for sitting down with us today and having this difficult yet necessary conversation. Thank you for allowing me to serve you over the last year. Although I'm no longer your director, I'm still now an advocate and a friend. So you'll always have me. I'll turn it back over to Sally. Thank you, everyone. We didn't have any questions online, but we had a lot of gratitude and love pouring out for all of you at the whole panel. So we can't thank you enough for doing that. I love the way all of you acknowledged each other. I think it was just truly amazing to get to witness, and I think all of us here need to acknowledge the societal issues that are in place and try and address those better. So I'm glad we had this conversation. I hope we can continue this conversation. And I'm just thankful to all of you for using your voices in this forum with us. And I know we talk a lot at Choose These Children. We say that the families we serve are forever changed by what happens to them. And I think that was apparent with all of you today. It was really interesting to me to hear you talking about 513 versus 514, because with the 9/11 community, we often talk about 9/11 versus 9/12. And the ways that 9/11 just kind of shocked the world, and the ways people came together on 9/12 and in the days after 9/11, that was like a lot of what the 9/11 community thinks to for hope. And so I'm going to be thinking about that a lot in terms of what was already in place, the trauma that already existed, the problems that already existed on 513, and the difference between that and 514. This conversation is so important. Your words are so important. Your voices are so important. But I think above all, we wish for this community much more than words. We wish for healing and for so many of the needs to be addressed. So I want to just thank everybody for joining us, everybody who's here in this room, and everybody who joined us virtually. We'll change the slide here. We encourage you all to visit our websites, obviously, to learn more. We hope you'll follow us online. As we continue to do this work, we often say we wish this work wasn't needed. We wish our mission would become irrelevant, but unfortunately it is more relevant than ever. So our families, the lived experiences, the voices that are here in this room, you know, you guys teach us the most about what we need to do, the better people we need to be, and the needs that we have to address for people impacted by these tragedies. So we will continue to keep our promise to you all and to all the families we serve as living memorials and living legacies. So thanks everyone for joining us today. And that concludes our event.